Hello everybody, welcome back to Bubbles and Splash for yet another week. And I've had the most exciting week because this week I saw a video that one of you had made. The awesome Thomas has made a story of Jonah from last week using the boat he made as part of the craft activity, and he's told the story in his own video. Here's a little picture of what he did. Isn't it brilliant? Now, if you've got anything you'd like to send me, just like that, then you can send it to bubblesandSplash@christchurchpennington.com, and I'll show everybody next week what you've been up to. Now, time to get on to what we do every week, our story. And this week, I've got a story for you about a lady called Jochebed and a little baby called Moses. So let me tell you a little bit about where they lived. They lived in Egypt, which is a really hot country in Africa. And you may have heard about it before because it has pyramids. And so they lived in this country a long, long time ago. And at that time, there was a king over Egypt, and he was called the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh was in charge of everybody. And he was a little bit mean and a little bit nasty because he had slaves. Now, slaves are people who are forced to work, but they don't get any money for working. They're just forced to work really, really long hours and do really, really hard jobs. And they were often treated really, really meanly and badly. And so Moses was born into this country where there were slaves. And the Pharaoh, because he was really mean and really quite nasty, he put out an order that any of Moses's people, so they were people called the Hebrews, if they had a baby, and if they had a baby boy, then that baby boy was to be killed. There weren't allowed to be any more Hebrew baby boys because the Pharaoh thought that the Hebrews were becoming too powerful. So he made this order to kill all the baby boys. So we start our story with Jochebed, Moses' mum, and she has this little baby Moses. And he's a boy. And she has two other children as well. She has Miriam and Aaron, who are quite a bit older than Moses. They're probably about maybe 8 or 9, something like that. And so she has this little baby Moses, and she's heard about the fact that all these baby boys are going to be killed. So she's really scared and she's really worried because, as we all know, babies cry a lot and they make a lot of noise. So trying to keep them secret and safe so they're not found to be killed would be really, really difficult. So Jochebed did her best. She hid Moses in her house. But when he got to about 3 months old, she realised that she couldn't keep doing this. He was getting bigger now and she would need to hide him from Pharaoh's soldiers. Otherwise, she was going to lose him. So she realised that there was only one thing to do, and that was to put him into God's hands and let God take care of him. So she built a little basket for Moses to go in. She made a lid for it so that he'd be hidden away and protected from the heat of the sun. And on a very sad day, she laid him in this basket and she took him down to the river. That was where she was going to hide him. So down by the river, there were bulrushes, and bulrushes are like these big, tall, almost like big tall grass, I guess, with big kind of sticks that come out with fluffy things on the end. And they're along the edge of the river. So she took him along with Miriam as her helper. They took baby Moses in his basket down to the river. And they placed him in the bulrushes where they would leave him and try and keep him safe. Now, I don't know what she thought. Maybe she thought that people wouldn't hear him crying there, or maybe she thought somebody else would find him and take care of him, not knowing he was a Hebrew baby. I don't know what she thought, but she left Miriam, his big sister, to look after him. She said to Miriam, you hide in the bulrushes and you make sure that, Moses is safe. So sometime later, after Jochebed had left, the Pharaoh's daughter, who I guess is a princess, she came down to the river to wash with some of her maids and people from the palace. And while she was washing and having a clean, she spied the basket in the bulrushes. And she was quite curious and thought, I wonder what is in there. So she went over to have a look at the basket. And when, of course, she opened the basket, what did she see? She saw the little baby Moses. And I imagine that, like most women, she looked at baby Moses and went, oh, isn't he cute? Because let's face it, that's what lots of mums do with babies, isn't it? They think they're cute. And she probably picked him up and gave him a little cuddle and held him. And at that point, she decided that, well, even though she knew this was probably a Hebrew baby, she couldn't let him die. He was too cute and lovely. So she decided to keep him as her own son and to bring him up. But there was one problem, because what do babies eat? Babies kind of eat milk for a long while, right? And you might have seen your mum or maybe even your dad making up milk for your baby brother or sister by putting some powder in a bottle and putting some water in. Well, back in those days, they didn't have powder and milk like that to feed a baby. The only way to feed a baby is if you'd had a baby yourself and you could feed it breast milk. So Pharaoh's daughter had no way of feeding baby Moses. So Miriam, who was still watching, trying to keep baby Moses safe, realised this. And at that point, she jumped up and she said to Pharaoh's daughter, "I could find one of the Hebrew women who could feed your baby for you." Now, Pharaoh's daughter thought this was a brilliant idea. So she said to Miriam, "Off you go and find one for me." And Miriam, of course, came back with Jochebed, Moses' mother, and said, "This lady could feed your baby for you." So Pharaoh's daughter let Jochebed take Moses home and play with him and look after him and feed him until the time where he no longer needed milk. So Jochebed got to safely bring up her own little boy for a couple of years. And then at that point, it was a little bit sad. She had to take him to the palace for him to become Pharaoh's daughter's son. And Pharaoh's daughter brought Moses up as her own son. But Moses got to live in the palace and have a lovely life and enjoy all the luxury of living in the palace as the king's grandson. Now, things did change for Moses a little bit, and we're going to follow that story next week. But today we want to let you know that just like God took care of little baby Moses, God will take care of you too. Now, our craft for this week is exciting. We're going to make little baby Moses baskets. So come next door with me into the kitchen and we'll see what we're going to do.